Register today for the Rainbow Push Coalition and Citizenship Education Fund's 46th Annual International Convention, Wednesday, July 12th through July 15th, 2017, at the Hilton and Towers in Chicago, Illinois. The theme this year is Heal and Rebuild. For further information, go to www.rainbowpush.org or call 773-373-3366. July 12th through July 15th, 2017, Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Pastor Joseph Bryant Jr. Welcome to the 2017 Push Tech 2020 Conference. Give yourselves a big round of applause. Our third annual meeting of this type, and we are so excited to be here in the Valley. We have made it down to Silicon Valley. Our first 2 years, we were in the heart of San Francisco, had wonderful experiences. Many of you shared with us in those first 2 years, but we decided to slide down the freeway a little bit where the weather's a little bit warmer and we can hang out down here actually in Silicon Valley with all these amazing companies that make up the Valley and are really changing the world. It's been a joy to be a part of this process under the tremendous visionary leadership of the one who has made all of this happen, who continues to ignite our spirits, lift our hearts, and move the needle along. Can you just show your great appreciation? He's going to share several times today, but I would be remiss if we didn't start off by recognizing the one and only, the leader, the legend, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. Here we are in Push Tech 2020 at the intersection of diversity, inclusion, and race equality. We are very excited to continue to move this needle along because we are living in some uncertain times, some turbulent times, but tech still helps us to appreciate the quality of creativity and all of the special things we are able to do to make our world a better place. And all of you in the room are responsible to help us move the needle. If you don't mind, because of our background as preachers, we don't like for you to be quiet. So can you just look at your neighbor and say, keep moving the needle? Whatever role you have, whether you're a technologist, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're in financial services, you're in diversity and inclusion, regardless of where you find yourself in the spectrum of this ecosystem, you are significant to the process. And we are really thankful to you that you're here today. We are celebrating this year in a different way. We're not going to hold ourselves to one location. We are seriously satellite and mobilized this year, as we'll be spending time today here at this wonderful campus, tomorrow at the Google campus, and then we're going to cross one of our bridges over to the East Bay, where my leader of this program, Mr. Butch Wing, says the people live over in the city of Oakland, and we're going to spend some time over there in partnership with Tech Equity Week, which is a national program that's continuing this similar agenda. So it means so much that you are here today, and I know a lot of times when we have events like this, we run out of time at the end and we aren't able to get all of our P's and Q's done. We forget some things, housekeeping items are left out. So allow me to recognize sponsors now instead of the end of the program. Is that okay? We want to just thank you so much, and because I'm also the National Sports Director, I have a propensity to like to hear noise because I'm used to being in arenas and being at coliseums like I was with Reverend on Sunday watching the Warriors win. And so if you don't mind making some noise as I call out these companies, we're literally shouting them out today. So we're going to shout out Salesforce, Intel, Oracle, Microsoft, Apple, Drexel, MFR, Google. Hold it. That's not loud enough. Wells Fargo, B of A, Cisco, Comcast, Yelp. I know it's after lunch, and I know we have that after lunch feeling sometimes. So I really need you to push it this time, more for your neighbors than for yourself, all right? Tell the person next to you, I'm about to get louder. All right, here we go. Last time, here we go, my last set. Uber, Airbnb, Ramirez and Company, CL King, Castle Oak, Williams Capital, Siebert, Ariel Investments. All right, I know what we need. I know what we need. So if you don't mind, it really is a special thing to be on this campus and in this place today. And it's my esteemed honor to introduce our individual host, even though he is so gracious and recognizing his team and his members of his staff and his wonderful assistant, Shelley, who's just continually helping us make this happen. HP has been a phenomenal partner, supporter, and they are a gracious host. Can you make some noise and really give thanks and appreciation to our friend who is the global diversity leader for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, where we now sit and enjoy this space, one of our sponsors and our hosts, and here he is, Mr. Brian Tippins.
Thank you, love you. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Brian, and no one can do that better than Pastor Brian. He can energize a crowd. That's very exciting stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to welcome you all here. This is a culmination of a lot of planning, and it's just a great honor to finally be here. I'm looking forward to the day. I hope you are as well. I'm kind of technical, but for some reason I couldn't figure out how to do a Facebook Live on my own phone. So if someone's Facebook Living, please, and can tag me in it later on, perfect. It's all about the social media. I believe in social proof. If you can't tweet about it, then it didn't happen. So you're here in our corporate headquarters. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise was born out of the separation of HP Company into two publicly traded companies. We were founded 75 years ago and been on this campus since about 1960, and it's always my honor. I've been here about 16 years and have the honor and pleasure of leading inclusion and diversity now, and have the honor of filling this room with more diverse people than have ever been in this room in the past, which is a great honor for me as well. I want to invite Reverend Jackson up to say a few words. First, logistics, because we haven't done this yet, and we're going to have a full room, and the fire marshals will get mad at me if I don't tell you where the exits are. Most importantly, where the restrooms are. So if you need to run to the washroom, it's outside these doors, women to the right and men to the left. I couldn't do as good a job of welcoming Reverend Jackson here as my boss, and so she was not able to be here today, but was here with us, a little over a month and a half ago, when Reverend was kind enough to join us for our Black History Month celebration, where we sat on the stage and gave some lessons about history, and she was so eloquent in welcoming the Reverend. I'd love to show a video so you could hear from her and her words of welcome. So let's play that video.
So now we know that, as I said, accelerating inclusion starts with embracing diversity at the top of the company while focusing on attracting, retaining, and promoting a diverse and inclusive workforce at every level. And before we move on today, I want to recognize a couple of special guests that we have with us today. First is a man who needs no introduction. And I'm going to bring him up in just a minute. But what I have to tell you is this individual catalyzed Silicon Valley in a way that I have rarely seen in business. And that's the Reverend Jesse Jackson. So. Reverend Jesse Jackson is going to speak to you in a bit, but he arrived in Silicon Valley about 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know, was it 3 years ago, Reverend? And he said, listen, what's going on here is just not right. And I have to say, a number of us were a little bit like, uh-oh, we're in a little bit of trouble here. But what we did at HP is we embraced the Rainbow Push Coalition, we embraced Reverend Jackson, we embraced what he stood for. And if you've now seen what's happening in Silicon Valley, I think that really the Reverend Jackson deserves virtually all the credit for this renewed emphasis on inclusion and diversity in Silicon Valley. So thank you for that. You deserve a huge round of applause.
Register today for the Rainbow Push Coalition and Citizenship Education Fund's 46th Annual International Convention, Wednesday, July 12th through July 15th, 2017, at the Hilton and Towers in Chicago, Illinois. The theme this year is Heal and Rebuild. For further information, go to www.rainbowpush.org or call 773-373-3366. July 12th through July 15th, 2017, Chicago, Illinois.
So please help me in welcoming the man who needs no introduction, Reverend Jesse Jackson. So we want to start with just a few minutes of remarks. And I mentioned that the last time you were on this stage and kind enough to join us was around Black History Month, and a lot of the discussion was around where we were, was around history. But it's important to think about where we are now in the phases of the movement and the continuation of the movement. Where are we, in your view, when you think about the phases of the civil rights movement?
I think, first of all, welcome everybody. Give yourself a hand. At one level, we have learned to survive apart, which was difficult with limitations on living apart and walls. Now we have an even bigger challenge, learning how to live together, to coexist in a multiracial, multicultural environment. It means digging deeper in your own ethnic pride and joy. Each of us has a story to tell. We live out of that narrative. For some, it may be the Chinese Exclusion Act. We must know what that means to Chinese Americans. Japanese internment camps, what that means to Japanese Americans. To be picking the fruits and vegetables and feeding everybody and can't eat yourself. You must know what that means to Latino Americans and farm workers. Of those who came as refugees, what that means to them. Those who came on ships as immigrants looking for a better life. And then there's another group that came not on immigrant ships, but came on slave ships. Each has its own value. African Americans will have been here in 2 years, 400 years. It's a different narrative than any other narrative because no one else was brought here against their will and made the source of commerce. This is the fourth stage of that struggle which drives America. Because we were here before most other groups, we're not the bottom, we're the foundation. The bottom is where you end up, the foundation is where you start from. Much of America started from that foundation of the slave trade, more valuable than land itself, or banks or insurance companies for more than 200 years. So stage one, if I were writing a freedom symphony, stage one of that symphony would be abolish slavery, 246 years. I heard during the campaign season slight references to 250 years, referring to the Declaration of Independence. We were here 167 years before the Declaration of Independence. It's considered non-people, a non-ocracy, not a democracy, a non-ocracy. So the first stage of our struggle was to end slavery, the curse of the universe. The second phase of our struggle was to end Jim Crow, an extension of slavery in so many ways, much more violent, because while in slavery, at least the slave masters had an interest in us living on the field, but living, so we can make other little slaves to keep working. But when we got the measure of power after 1870, 5,000 blacks were lynched without a single indictment in 1880 to 1940. The third stage was access to the right to vote. Interestingly enough, the narrative goes that blacks got the right to vote in 1965. We got the protected right to vote, but blacks could not vote with protections, but white women couldn't serve on juries. And 18-year-olds who were serving in Vietnam could not vote. You couldn't vote on college campuses. You couldn't vote bilingually. You could not have proportional representation at the conventions. And so when the foundation moved, everything moved politically and started in 1965. That's ended in 2013. That's why there's such political turmoil today. But beyond slavery, which was that phase, fundamentally a phase, beyond Jim Crow, the third stage, the right to vote. And each instance we got free but never got equal. In the discussion of equality was seen as a throwback, a fight back on the system. So we're in the fourth stage of the struggle today. It affects everybody because the foundation is yet to begin moving. Say access. To capital, industry, technology, deal flow, and relationships. You can be out of slavery, out of Jim Crow, have the right to vote, and starve to death. without access to capital, industry, technology, deal flow, relationships. And that's what brings us to Hewlett Packard Enterprise Day, because we've established a relationship here in the private sector. We challenged this board chairman a few years ago at a shareholders meeting about the company's board of directors not looking like its consumer base. We were told they were making adjustments. Since that time, they kind of split into Hewlett Packard Inc. And Enterprise. There were no black board members, now there are 4. And that's a step. Put your hands together, that's a big deal. Apple has Mr. Jim Bell on it as a member of their board. On Twitter's board now is Deborah Lee from BET. The chairman of the board of Microsoft's successor to Bill Gates is John Thompson, head of Symantec from Florida A&M. We see changes taking place. There is too much to be done to celebrate, but we know the needle really is moving, and it's moving forward. And it's all because of our efforts. I heard someone say yesterday that you can't move forward because of consultants. I don't accept that, because the real rhythm is say people, power, program, people, power, program, progress. When people come together, they have power. If that power drives the program, then you make progress. So we begin to come together here to buy shares of stock in these corporations. They use the platform of the shareholders' meetings to make our case. And our case is too right to be wrong. So we have 5 weapons. Vote, marching feet, dollars, vote, marching feet, dollars, vote, marching feet, dollars, and the rightness of our cause. If we are basically right, it's hard to impose wrong down people's throats. If we're basically right, right is a weapon all by itself. And so we've come with a righteous cause, and that cause is inclusion. And what we said at that shareholders meeting, I don't know that I guys make that we were going to throw some chairs or something. Yeah. We have done that.
She did, yeah.
Well, our point was that we had a proposition to offer the company, and all the people who were there looking for another profit looked at us around a rather strange way. We said, we have a way to expand the company's margin of profit. And everything got real quiet to say that the 100 largest cities are majority black and brown. Say the 100 largest cities are majority black and brown. We represent market, money, talent, inclusion, and growth. And there's growth, everybody wins. Now, to not see that market is like a one-eyed quarterback. You cannot be the best you can be. If scouts going out to look for ball players and can't see Jackie Robinson, they can't see Willie Mays, they can't see Hank Aaron. It's hard to be an effective quarterback with one eye. And to lock us out represents the one-eyed quarterbacks who have by intentional theories of race supremacy, but more often by blind eyes that cannot see for their own benefit. So when we grow, everybody wins. And that's our basic proposition, Brian.
Perfect. Now, you touched on a lot of what I was going to ask in the second question about why the Valley. Does that surprise you? Why the Valley? But so, you talked about being at the board meeting. It's been about 2.5 years since you first came to HP and called on this company, specifically in the Valley generally, to disclose numbers, to be transparent, to talk about the things we're doing. And a lot has changed since then. But I would offer that we're living in different times now. Is there something different about this political environment, this economic environment that changes the approach? Should we be thinking differently about where we are today, Reverend?
Say today, we must make America great again.
I knew that wasn't the answer I was looking for.
Well, right. Well, I think what's different today as we study the seasons of our struggle, the first stage was driven by cotton. Picking cotton was not that bad. It was we could only pick cotton. It could not benefit from the industry. If you can pick cotton and sack it and bale it and sell it and borrow money and turn it into textiles and sell it, then picking cotton is a thing you do in the process. But if you're limited to picking cotton only, well, that drove us to a civil war. It drove us to attempt to internationalize and break up this country between North and South, and the South wanted to hook up with Britain and France. Cotton was the season. Well, you could not have a civil war there around cotton. Next was the Industrial Revolution. It was driven kind of by the cars. And just as we were fundamental to the cotton phase as pickers without wages and benefits, then we went to Detroit, as it were, in the automotive industry. That became another phase of our struggle. Well, the biggest phase today is not cotton, it is not automotive, it's what Silicon Valley produces. The instant richest people on earth, most global industry on earth comes out of Silicon Valley. And we cannot be left in the margins of this industry because the industry was built out of defense contracts. We served in the wars. We served in the wars. We built the country. We paid taxes. We bled to make the defense of our country a priority. This defense industry is our industry. This stuff was started with defense contracts and subsidy. And now we've gone from tax subsidy to tax avoidance to tax dodging, to tax drafts. And you have the most productive, every place you go. I was in India a couple of years ago, and out in the middle of nowhere, it seemed, 50 miles out in the real rural countryside near Thailand's border, right in the middle of the field using Facebook, talking to each other over cross war lines, because that is this phase of our struggle. So we're trying to get 1,000 churches. I want your church involved. I want Tyrone, I want Axel Adams, please stand, whoever you are, Axel. Just keep standing, Axel, and Dr. Tyrone McGowan stand. This is our national field director, and this is our minister's director, 1,000 churches. We're trying to get 1,000 churches to put in their empty Sunday school space 20 to 40 laptops to teach our children apps and codes, stock market game, financial literacy, robotics, and begin to produce a generation of youth who can join this age. We mastered basketball. Yeah. It takes some effort to be with y'all tonight and miss that game. But I'll be here. But let me go a step further, that if you just say, if you go from picking cotton balls to picking basketballs and can't grow with the ownership, nothing fundamental has changed. We don't own one Major League Baseball team. We're picking the ball. We don't own one National Football League team. On the one basketball team. Because we're stuck, locked out of the fourth stage of our struggle, access to capital. Those major league teams are all, watch this, non-for-profit. All Major League Baseball teams are non-for-profit. And usually they're a big stadium built by pension funds, right? Mm-hmm. And so between tax subsidy and pension funds and non-for-profit, and then come advertising, they become rich on non-for-profit corporations. Even to think is to get outside the box. I'm trying to get our thinking outside of, we build buildings, if we save enough money, we can build a big building. So big buildings in downtown America are built with pension funds. United Airlines has not paid any taxes the first quarter. They're rolling over because they're losing money. One issue in United Airlines was beating of Dr. Dow, which was humiliating. But the issue beyond that beating, it opened the door for the fact that United Airlines has no black Asian on their board of directors, or not in their C-suite, not in their pensions or 401k, the planes they rent to fly. They don't own all the planes. So to get beyond the seat on the plane, like getting beyond the seat on the bus. As we grow, open doors, we get to the corner, we can see around the curve. Y'all got that? That didn't get past anybody, did it? So when you get to the corner, you see around the curve. We're at that corner today. If I were to ask you to come here to discuss public accommodation, you would say, public accommodation, why go all the way to Palo Alto to discuss public? We won that battle. Let's go to the right to vote. We won that battle. Let's figure out how we get access to capital and technology. Say, well, let's discuss that. That's because we're seeing around that curve. Ministers will hear present stand. Ministers will present stand. I say, Reverend Mark, ministers will present stand. You are members of our church stand. You members of our church. Just keep
Everybody
standing.
should stand. A church.
Now, the reason I asked it, I want you to get your church involved in this process, be seated, of getting tech centers in your church. We took 100 kids on the HBCU tour last week. 100, I asked them how many of them have a laptop at home, about 10 hands went up. And almost none had them in their schools, and those who did have them, no one was there to teach them. So they may graduate, come Lord, and all that stuff, but if they cannot use a laptop, they cannot survive their first year. They will come home as if something is wrong with them. I don't object to H-1B workers. So H-1B workers come from Korea and India because they're taught to be scientific, technological. There's nothing about an Indian child or Korean child that's not amongst us, among African American children, but Latino children. So part of our mission is not to get hung up negating H-1B as if we're going to lock people out into the. We want the whole world to grow. Let those children come in and grow, but you got to go through Oakland to get to the airport to get them. See, if I go to India or China or go to Korea, I got to drive through Oakland or San Francisco to get to them.
I'm going to ask you one more question, Reverend. Butch is giving me the sign. We have to go fast.
What kind of sign Butch give me?
The T sign. I'm going to ask you quickly, where do we go from here? So we talked about the journey, and we're rounding the corner. You opened up by giving great credit to the work that we had done when you called, and I think that was largely with much more work to do, because we decided that we'd much rather be friends and partners and adversaries, that we were transparent and in this together. But you mentioned earlier today, not all companies have been as embracing. What's the role that we all play in the future going forward? Where do we go from here, Reverend?
See, research, education, negotiation, confrontation, resolution. There are some other companies that use our product, our tax dollars, our subsidy, who are not engaged in the process. We must find out who they are. Any company that does not have an African American or Latino on their board is subject to be confronted. Without people of color or women in their C-suites, they're subject to be confronted. I do not know how you move the needle forward unless you push it. Dr. King will often say the arc of the universe is long. See the arc? The universe is long, but it bends toward justice. If we do the bending, it ain't gonna bend just for the hell of it. It ain't gonna bend just cause of rain. It bends because somebody pulls it down to make it bend. And I think the next stage is to look at the companies with whom we're working now, and look at those who have not yet joined the process. They're waiting for their door to be knocked on. We shall knock on those doors. That's why when we will have left here today, I want John Mitchell or Butch Wing or Reverend
Joe Bryant?
Right. I want you to join the rainbow because we have work to do. You must join a movement Just that was a movement to end slavery, a movement to end Jim Crow, a movement to the right. There must be a movement.
There must be a movement
for economic justice. And many of our freedom allies will not be, talk to me, say many of our freedom allies will not be our equality allies. I think I missed somebody. So many of our freedom allies who don't like to see people beat in the street and bloody, being shot by police, you can't use the toilet, can't use the library. That embarrasses them, right? So many of our freedom allies will not be our equality allies, our share of equity and parity. And that's the next phase of our struggle. There are some companies here that totally depend upon our creativity, upon our dollars, upon our votes. We must unleash on them research, our marching feet, and the rightness of our cause. And the best news is, and I think Paul maybe was trying to say, whenever we're involved, inclusion leads to growth. When there's growth, everybody wins. We didn't know how good baseball could be, or basketball could be, until everybody could play. There's nothing within us that can teach us to dribble a basketball that cannot teach us to push the buttons for global technology.
So join me in thanking Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. Thank you. Now we're going to transition into panels in a second, but so where I'm sitting, where I stand and I'm looking out in the crowd, I see lots of ones and twos of empty seats throughout the crowd, and there's a number of people around the back who are standing because they don't have seats. If you're sitting next to an empty seat that's available, would you mind raising your hand just so people could see, because there's lots throughout the room. And as you're doing that, and as we transition to the next phase, I want to end in our thanks to Reverend Jackson with a small, brief video tribute.
Here in Silicon Valley, African Americans, Latinos are very underrepresented in technology. That won't change unless those of us who run big companies and small companies actually say we are going to change this.
An industry driven by creativity, there's no way of measuring how much creativity you've lost when people are locked out. Who knows who'll have the next best idea? No one has a monopoly on ideas.
Register today for the Rainbow Push Coalition and Citizenship Education Fund's 46th Annual International Convention, Wednesday, July 12th through July 15th, 2017, at the Hilton and Towers in Chicago, Illinois. The theme this year is Heal and Rebuild. For further information, go to www.rainbowpush.org or call 773-373-3366. July 12th through July 15th, 2017, Chicago, Illinois.
Thank you all again. We appreciate your presence, and wasn't that just a wonderful one-on-one with Brian and Reverend Jackson? We appreciate so much the kindness of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And let me just remind you of a few housekeeping items. I did hear a few jingles and buzzies. If you don't mind putting your phones on silent, we are trying to capture these moments for permanency, and so we want to have as few interruptions as we can without having to hear all of your wonderful ringtones during our presentations as a distraction to the presenters as well as to the filming. And then also we ask that everybody, I see your phones are out, make sure you start hashtagging out, you're tweeting out, you're Facebooking out, you're getting the information out. Everybody, I don't mind looking at the top of your head. Can you put your head down right quick and just pretend that you're putting something, just pretend, even if you're not, just for a moment, I just want to see top of your head as you're tweeting out, you know, I'm here at PushTech 2020, hashtag it, PushTech 2020, go ahead and hashtag it, hashtag your company, hashtag your favorite restaurant or whatever else you want to hashtag, but just make sure you hashtag PushTech 2020, okay? Thank you so much. We're going to have a couple of panels now, and let me just bring up the leader of this particular panel because we have so many amazing people in the room, and this particular individual is a true superstar. We are so grateful and honored to have her with us to lead this panel as we go into the conversations about diversity and inclusion in technology. And I just want to give her propers because she has done such an amazing job, and she continues to be a light and a rising star among us. She's senior policy advisor from the White House in their science and technology. She's co-founder of Code 2040, but more than that, she's someone of substance who believes in the causes that we support as an organization, and she really makes us look good. So if you don't mind, just put your hands together for the host, moderator of our next panel, Ms. Laura Weidman-Powers. You are amazing. You're a superstar.
Too kind.
And for all of you that are joining her on the panel, I think you are welcome to join us at this time. We have some transition moments, but you are welcome to. Can you just give our entire panel a hand? They're going to introduce themselves. I didn't want to try to bio them, so they're going to introduce themselves as they come.
Thanks. I will kick us off by just introducing myself and providing a little bit of context as our panel gets seated. What we have up here is a group of really incredible people who are leading diversity and inclusion efforts at some of the most influential companies across San Francisco, across Silicon Valley, and across the tech industry. And we're going to hear from each of them. But I want to just take a brief moment to set a little bit of context about why this is so mission critical and frankly why we are up here having this conversation. The Reverend Jackson described diversity in tech as the 21st century civil rights movement. And this is really important context because it can be easy when talking about individual companies to get bogged down on, well, it's about this particular company's business case or their ability to make profits or the percent by which their population changes. And all those things are important, but they're important because of a larger context. And there's two real points that I want to make sure we keep in mind. One is the power of opportunities in the tech industry to transform the economic trajectory of an individual, a family, and a community. And there's one stat that always stands out for me, which is that the median household income of a Black family and a Latino family combined is the same as a starting salary for someone in the tech sector. So when we talk about bringing opportunity, getting folks into these companies, opening up these jobs to folks from different backgrounds, that's what we're talking about, is sending people on a totally different economic trajectory. And the second point that I want folks to keep in mind is we're sitting in the Valley. A lot of times these conversations about tech and the tech sector can feel a little bit niche. We're talking about these companies that most people don't necessarily understand or interact with on a day-to-day basis. But the truth is that tech is infiltrating every industry. And it's infiltrating every city around the country and around the world. And so what can seem niche today, these skills are going to be critical across the board. And actually, even today, 50% of all jobs that are in the top quartile by salary require technical skills. that's only going to grow. So that's the context in which we're having these conversations about what it looks like at these individual companies. So I'm so excited to be on stage with all of you. I actually may stand so I can see all of your faces while I talk to you. So I want you all to just start off by introducing yourselves. And we have a lot of people on this panel and not much time. So we're going to practice like super concise, fast answers because I want everybody to get to hear from all of you. So when you introduce yourself, I would just like for you to share your name, the company that you're at, the length of time that the diversity and inclusion role or function has existed at your company, and how long you have been in that role. And we'll just start there and go down the line, and then I've got some more questions. We can start on this side. You can start.
Okay. My name is Bernard Coleman. I work at Uber. I'm a global head of diversity and inclusion. I've been in the role 3 months, and the position's existed since, I believe, 2015. So I'm relatively new.
Hello, family. Damian Hooper Campbell. I am at eBay. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for eBay. The role has existed for 9 months, and I've been in the role for 9 months.
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Williams from Airbnb. I am actually not the head of diversity. Our head of diversity, David King, could not be here today, but I am here in his stead. He joined us in February of last year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Candace Morgan. I'm the head of diversity at Pinterest. I've been in my role for 15 months now. Can't believe it. And Pinterest has been working on diversity since 2014.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Mangolini. I lead global diversity and inclusion at Google. The role has existed 12 years, so probably the longest on the panel, and I've been in the role going on 7.
Awesome. So hold on to the mic. We'll reverse order now. And I would love if each of you could share one thing that you've seen in your tenure, either something that you've pushed and worked on or something you've observed at your own company that works, that has worked, and one thing that has totally failed and fallen flat, that you tried and you thought it was going to work and it did not make a difference. So both of those.
I think one of the things that I see that works is something that we call at Google tone at the top. So it's very difficult to do this work from the grassroots, from bottoms up. It's not going to work, actually. You'll get only so far, and you're going to hit a wall. At the end of the day, your employees need to hear from the CEO. They need to hear from your senior executives about the importance of creating a diverse workforce and driving an inclusive culture. So. And I've seen in the 7 years that I've been in this role, I've seen that our senior leadership engagement increase over time, and seen us make some progress on that end. And what doesn't work? I mean, it's a harder question. I think one of the things I go back and forth. I've been often asked the question whether we have mandatory unconscious bias training, for example, and we don't mandate it. We launched it back in 2013. About 70% of the company's gone through it. It's built into our new Googler orientation. We don't mandate it, and I'm of two minds when I think about it. Right, I think it's hard to force someone to do something they don't want to do because they may not hear it. There needs to be readiness in order to actually reap benefits from it. But we didn't actually. So I'd say while we didn't force people to do that, I would say I've seen other places where that have required it with less success.
Yeah. And I'll give you another 10 seconds to think. The reason why I pose this question is because a lot of this work, we may be recording data or learnings internally, but there's not as much sharing out and dialogue about particularly what's been tried and failed. Like, let's save each other the time for making those mistakes. So it's important for folks to get a sense of what works, but also like what may be a waste of time and resources.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to talk more about this, grab me. There's so much that we try, and you never know exactly how people are going to react to it. Even things with good intentions sometimes don't have the results you intend. So one thing that we tried that didn't work very well was we basically had all of our engineers have a mandate of helping us find connections these weren't necessarily referrals, but just connections within their networks. We asked them to think a little harder beyond the usual suspects. But we actually made sure that we kept track and that every engineer helped us with this effort. And while it sounds pretty intuitive, look beyond your networks. We're not, just to look at our funnel. What didn't work was that a lot of the referrals weren't for positions that we currently had open. And so you get a couple of things. You get people resenting that they had to do it. And then you also get people feeling like you're not acting on the connections. And in many cases, these weren't close connections, but still acting on the connections and the effort of that work. So that's something that we've taken into, we did that last year. We've taken those lessons into 2017. One thing that I would say that worked was a very bold step, and I can talk more about this later, that Pinterest took, which I found quite attractive, which was setting goals around the diverse workforce that we wanted to hire. So when I started, we were hiring, for example, Black and Latino software engineers at a rate of 1%. And if you look at the makeup of the industry and our peers, that's pretty typical. So we set a goal to change that rate within a year to 8%. And we got to 9%. And literally, and I could, there's some other examples as well I can share, but we pretty much doubled our rate on the business side as well. And it was just around creating so much energy around this goal, like we would many of our business goals or financial goals, that we were able to see some results.
Yeah, I'd have to echo that. What we've seen work at Airbnb is certainly about setting goals and holding people accountable for the goals. Did I steal your thunder? No. Okay, right. So that has worked for us certainly, and it does start at the leadership level, but really rolling that down to middle management and making that shared accountability known throughout the organization has really worked for us in our recruitment efforts. Something that hasn't worked for us, and this is debatable, and I've seen it in other organizations, but having one person in recruiting thinking about diversity does not work, right? You need the entire recruiting organization to be bought into why diversity is important, and that should be rolled into their goals as well.
Something that has worked, empowering the people who are in our positions. So what I mean by that is not just making sure that the person is entering into the company with the right title and level so that they don't have to beg for a seat at the table, but they already have it. But also making sure that from a budget standpoint, they are empowered, making sure that from a head count and team standpoint, it's not just one person or two people on the diversity team, but also the strategic empowerment. And so, at eBay, when I first started, we said, hey, what can we do strategically to empower this position? And so I now own university recruiting for the company. And so what that means is, as a proud Morehouse alum, when I want to go back to Morehouse, or when I want to go to North Carolina A&T or to a women's college, I don't have to ask anybody to do that. It's not a bolt-on, it's an inherent part of our strategy. So we're very proud of that. So that's what works, is empowering people. A lot of companies will create a role like this and embed it somewhere deep into the organization where you really don't have a say-so. You're very passionate, but you don't have a say-so. So that's what works. What doesn't work, in my opinion, based on my experience, are BS conversations, where we are just having a conversation about this at a very surface level, where we're not becoming comfortable getting uncomfortable, where we create environments where people who are not of color feel so afraid to say African American instead of Black that they don't say anything, or where we feel so afraid to come in and talk about Black Lives Matter that we don't say anything, and all that bottles up. So having real conversations is something that works. I've seen a lot of places not have those real conversations.
So I'm going to drape myself in the newness that I am in the role. So I've been at Uber for 3 months. So I have a short timeline in terms of saying what went well and what didn't. So I'll start with our employee resource groups. I found them to be incredibly powerful and impactful throughout the organization. I find them to be our ultimate focus group, and they are the culture carriers for the organization. So things that happen there kind of bubbles up. So you can kind of test the temperature and know what's going to happen. And they're like the canaries in the coal mine. And I found them to be incredibly helpful in terms of crowdsourcing ideas, because I've really been leaning on them in terms of learning the lay of the land. We recently did an ERG summit, so I found it to be really, really impactful, because we all got to meet together. We got to meet together, break bread. We talked about intersectionality, and we got cross-aligned, making sure like that one person's struggle wasn't greater than the other, but understand we have common interests and common bonds that we can push forward together. So I thought coming out of that was extremely impactful, because before I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. Is it going to be a struggle competition? But it wasn't. In terms of what I've seen go poorly, nothing's gone poorly yet. It's just been shifting strategy. Kind of what everyone else has been echoing. People really put a lot of emphasis on unconscious bias. So as a practitioner of this work, I love it. I think it's interesting, but it's just one tool in the toolbox. And if you hang your hat on that, you're going to fail. So I think you need to look at it as one of the many things you're looking at in terms of training. So I think if you're hanging your hat on that, that will be a failure. And we were looking at that, and then we kind of shifted when we were like, we need to be moving people from letting people know what the words are, what the issues are, and then moving them to positive psychology so that you don't get stuck. In my career, people get stuck when they go like, unconscious bias, oh, I'm mad, and then they stuck there. So we got to move you past that, like, okay, now what do we do about it? So that was more in the Hillary campaign, but that's my story.
So I have a few questions that I will ask you all to just popcorn, and we can have 2 to 3 people for each question. But don't worry, I have some more questions for all of you. So you brought up a struggle competition. I'm curious how this idea of like who is the focus has played out in your organizations. And there was a large company recently, not represented on this stage, that came out and said, we really care about equality, and we're going to start with women. And everyone was like, not cool, y'all, not cool. Like, you can't tell people of color to get in line or LGBTQ people to get in line. Like, you have to think about a holistic strategy. And yet at the same time, I think there's real issues around cultural competency, and there aren't one-size-fits-all solutions. And so you do have to kind of segment your market and understand how to build for different populations. So how do you balance that in your role?
I'm glad you raised that. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about in the last couple of weeks, because the conversation sometimes can go to a place where certain people who aren't in the categories that we're talking about when we lead our trainings or we start the discussion around diversity, or the idea that people have when they think about diversity, those people feel like they are not invited to those discussions and can actually feel excluded by those discussions. And that happens very quickly. Even if you look at the next panel, we'll talk more about politics, but you look at groups that start to feel marginalized around diversity discussions. It's a real issue. So for us, that's highlighted by the fact that we have diversity goals, and our diversity goals are focused on 3 specific groups, our public goals. They're focused on women in engineering, specifically women in technology, and they're focused on Black, Latino, and Native American employees across our company. And the reason we focus there for the diversity goals is because we tried at one point to focus on several different goals at once. And so we focus on what we called atypical diversity. So people who didn't just come from the same schools and the same companies as so much of the technology workforce. And we made a goal around it as well, and we achieved that goal very quickly. But our percentage of hires around Black and Latino employees was stagnant. And so what I try to tell people is that our goals are just, I'm gonna borrow Bernard's phrase, it's just a tool in the toolbox. It's one piece of our strategy. Our strategy around inclusion, our strategy around making fair decisions about who gets career development opportunities or who gets a top job or a top assignment, that encompasses everyone from someone with an accent who might speak in a meeting and feel like they're not necessarily heard, to someone who is an introvert, to all different, someone who's an older employee in this technology industry that can be very, very youth-oriented. And so that's how we balance that discussion and highlight everybody.
And I think a reason a lot of people focus on women first, because I think what I've noticed, everyone wants simple when this is actually complex. And they'll go, well, 50% of everybody are women, let's start there. And so I guess from a starting point, that makes sense, but it's a number of levers you need to be pulling at the same time. You need to be focusing, that's why we were focusing on intersectionality and saying we're not, I occupy many spaces. I'm not just a man, I'm just not Black. And when you think about any other people's experiences, there are a whole bunch of things. And we focus on intersectionality, you find you have more in common. And not to use the campaign lore, but stronger together, you get things done a lot faster. And that's the one thing I'm trying to push, is making sure, like, remember, we have a lot of common bonds here. Let's push together and cross a line, and then you'll be more effective and get there much, much faster. Versus just starting with one group and saying everybody wait in line, because what does that, what do you accomplish? And you're creating more work for yourself.
Exciting news! The free Rainbow Push mobile app is ready for download. Get all the news and schedules for the upcoming convention and more. Go to the Rainbow Push homepage at www.rainbowpush.org to download app today. Noticias importantes. La aplicación móvil y gratis de Rainbow Push está lista para utilizar. Obtengan todas las noticias y horarios para la próxima convención y mucho más. Visiten la página de inicio de Rainbow Push en www.rainbowpush.org para descargar la aplicación hoy.
When I think of Rainbow Push, I think of two words: social justice.
Education advocacy.
Political empowerment.
Freedom and equality.
Global humanitarian.
Evolutionary, revolutionary.
Political change.
Inclusion, evolution. Push Excel.
Progress, justice.
Jesse Jackson.
Left for dissidence. Equality and perseverance.
People united.
Push yes.
And it was Jesse Jackson who was the young man of the movement and now is an elder statesman. And we've got to make sure that we have another generation that will be pushing forward, another generation that will be building an Operation Breadbasket, another generation that will be talking about new economic strategies for those who are poor.
And ensuring that we are never politically disenfranchised. I hope you already recognize that there is a movement afoot to rob us of what we fought so hard for and shed blood for, and that is the right to express our voice through voting.
It is our duty, it is our job to support our organizations.
We got to do it. Grassroots organization, hitting the streets and challenging those in the suites.
Make sure you join Operation Push, Rainbow Push, today.
Keep hope alive.